All right, welcome back to another video on the 55. Left off showing you guys we got the engine mounts all finished up, and I mentioned adding some lower plates, which I went ahead and got that done there and there. So those are all finished up, and what I'm gonna do now is sling the engine and trans back in it, get it bolted back up, get it sitting in there. That way we can run our laser deal and get our pinion angle set and figure out where that needs to be and weld the rear end in. So for now, we're gonna go ahead and get this engine and trans back in, get that knocked out. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get this thing put in. That way we can get that all figured out. All right, the reason you guys saw me struggling so much, our pickup points were across this way, and that made the engine tilt, so it made it really difficult getting it on my mounts. And then I think after welding in those plates and all the heat that was in there, I think they did shift ever so slightly, and I did have to go through and elongate the holes just a little bit at the front, and then the bolt slipped right through. But that's why I was fighting so much. It was really something simple, just elongated the holes just a touch, and they slid right through. Bolted the trans back up, and she is in there. So got all the weight down on it. So now we await doing the pinion angle. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to that, but obviously the next clip, you guys will see us starting on that, and it'll be a little bit easier. That or cutting the hole for the shifter, one of the two. Okay, we're getting in on making the shifter hole ready. So I went ahead and got a start just because it was easier for me to go over what I'm doing than try to film it as I'm doing it. So as you know, got the engine put back in it, and it's in there. Everything's fully bolted in. So what I did from under here is I got my shifter as close to being aligned as possible, but obviously the top hit the floor. So I marked where it touched the floor, and that got me a good starting point. And then I measured from the tunnel pinch weld there and back to where that was, and used the punch from the bottom side to make a little divot so I could see it from the top. Measured it from the inside, made sure it lined up, and it did. Drilled a pilot hole, and then used the step bit, made a nice circle, then made a little square just enough to fit the shifter itself through. So now I've got a good starting point. So now I can go through, make my square a little bit bigger, bolt the shifter up, and run this, and also hook my linkages up, which I'll be doing here in a minute, and run this thing through the gears and see how big of a hole I need. And then if I get the thing dialed in where I want it, then I'll obviously be able to put the shifter cover and boot on it, which will be pretty cool. And then after that, we should be ready to start setting the pinion angle. So I'll kind of take you guys along with the process on getting this shifter dialed in, because a lot of people normally would just cut a big giant jagged hole and be done with it. So I wanted to measure and get this thing done right, so that way we can have, you know, the nicest made hole we can in this floor, especially since it's a brand new floor. You don't want it to look like garbage. So anyway, I'm gonna go through and oversize the square hole just a little bit, and then we'll go from there. Okay, done a little bit of work off camera, but not too much. As you saw, we were getting the hole ready and measured and drilled for the shifter. So I went ahead and got that hole made. So I'll kind of run you through what I did. So I know I told you measurement wise what I did, but here's the end result right now. As you can see, I got my spots pre-punched for the shifter little boot and trim piece, which is over here. So basically what you guys want to do if you're doing this at home, just take time, take your measurements, and get your actual shifter itself that bolts to the trans through your hole, just enough to fit that thing in there. Then you can just start slowly working your way out, and you don't have some nasty, hacked up looking hole. So now I got a nice square to work with. And the reason I left a little bit more room on this side is being that this car isn't like, it's going to be a street car, but more functional race car than anything. And I don't want it to be hard to service this thing. So I left more room so you can be able to put this thing up in first gear. Whatever's easiest, really doesn't matter, I guess, with this much room. But you can get a ratchet and a socket to get your bolts out. Now, I won't be running them this long. That's just the only original fine thread style bolts I had. Those are like original factory hardware. But I will be getting some shorter bolts, but they work for now and don't hit anything. So we got first, second, third, fourth, and I do believe I got reverse to cooperate as well. There we go. So anyway, now getting to where I'm at now is I don't want to just run self tappers or machine screws through there. It just looks kind of trashy, and not necessarily trashy, but it just doesn't work. They end up, the holes waller out, the screw, then you got a boot flopping around, and I ain't having it. So I'm going to drill these to a specific size, and I'm actually going to use a nut zert for like a 1024, which is not too small, but not too large to make work. So got our 1024 nut zerts right here, and got our tool. We have two different style tools. This one will work perfect for these. Our bigger one wants to break the 1024 adapter, so I don't want to go through that, so we'll use this guy. So you basically have to drill you out a hole just enough to fit these little grippers, that width there. Drill you that size hole, slip these down in here, set your tool up and squeeze it like a rivet tool, and it'll squeeze this thing in place, and now you have full on a threaded hole, a threaded insert. So I'm gonna go ahead, drill those, get that knocked out, and we should be ready to lay the boot over it and the chrome piece and bolt it all up, and we'll have ourselves a shifter. Okay, what's up? It's the next day. Left off showing you guys we were getting the shifter boot and cover plate put in, and I went ahead and finished all that up, but I needed to take it back apart for reasons I'll show you in just 1 second. But being that I had it assembled, I didn't get a video of all the nut certs installed. So this is what we wound up with. Got our hole made, got the edges cleaned up, and there's the nut certs fully installed. So you just got nice threaded holes instead of, oh, there we go. Instead of ugly drill holes with sheet metal screws jammed through them. So it actually bolts up nice and holds and can be removed multiple times without wearing out. So I'm gonna use these lights real quick and show you guys from the bottom side what I was talking about. So they look like a rivet, how they compress and wedge themselves into the metal. So pretty nice. So what I'm doing now, even though I had it all mated up once, we're not sure what shifter we want to use. So the Hurst shifter I had in here, I believe this is for an, oh, that's nice. So the one I had in here, I believe is for an F body. And if you look, this is just like the one out of the 67 Camaro we're doing. It angles way over towards the driver's side. When you shift into second, this actually rides right up against the edge of the seat. And we could bend it and tweak it over just a little bit, which we might do. But we both really like this Hurst Indy shifter, which you can tell it has a significant length difference, which I think will be more comfortable. But I do believe this was for a floor shift automatic. So I've got to redo the holes. So that's what I'm doing right now. So when I get that done and reinstall everything, I'll show you guys how the boot looks and how it mates up and what this bigger shifter looks like, because it looks pretty nice. Or I think it will look pretty nice and feel a lot nicer. So we will see. I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing modified, get those holes marked up, and we'll pick back up after I'm done with that. All right, and we're back. New day. As you can see, car is getting wired as we speak. See everything going on back here. And I left off getting that shifter modified, and I don't think I put a clip of it in here. I personally prefer this one, just because it's a lot more comfortable. Turned out really nice. I just think it's really comfortable being up here with how you sit in this car, but the other one wasn't too bad, so we may modify it a little bit to get it tweaked over. That way you're not hitting the seat, and then we can try both of them out. So that's where we're at there. Jason's actually getting everything wired up, so I'll touch base with that when he gets a little bit further along and kind of go over what all he's doing. But for now, we are finally ready to check pinion angle and see where I'm at with those, check what the transmission's sitting at, and see where I have the rear end. So I had the rear end set up at 0, but we'll see. We're gonna check it with this digital angle finder right now, so we'll get under there and see what we got. All right, figured I'd show you what we got under here. So I got my light set up. Now, since this get settled up here, since this yoke is a nice machine surface, let's get this to light back up. So you can see it fluctuates right between, see if we can get that where you can see it better. 5.8 to 5.9 is where it's wanting to set at. It was 5.8 a second ago, now it's saying 5.9. So right in there is, you know, about perfect. That's kind of what I expected. So now we'll jump back here, see where I have it at. And I know we want seeing that we're coming down 5.9 degrees this way, so the rear end needs to come up to about right at about 4 degrees. That way when we get on it, that rear end's gonna come up and even out our drive shaft as straight as possible. So that being said, we'll go ahead and start on the rear end so we can get that set up where we want it and get it dialed in. So let's get back there and get that set up. What I did is loosen up all the U-bolts just a little bit and basically put a floor jack underneath the front of the pig there. And then let me wiggle this so we can see where we're at here. So it's right about 4.2. So it's within right around that, within that 1 to 2 degree mark. So that should be just about perfect. So I think now I can probably tack this thing in place. That way I can fully weld these pedestals in. So should be where we're at. I'm pretty happy with it. So we'll go ahead and go from there and see what we get. A little update on where I'm at. Here's the here's the angle finder. We're at 3.7 and the transmission is at a 5.8. So we are pretty much right at a 2 to 2.1 degree angle, which is perfect for what we're doing. And if it's not, we can always shim the front of this rear end and get it get that pinion angle up a little bit more. But she is tacked in place, which, get the light over here so we can see it. So got a couple tacks on there on both this front side, back side, and the same over there on the other side. So that's good enough for now until we get this thing up and can finish weld it in place. Anyway, yeah, so that's probably the next step, is to get this thing up where we can finish weld these pedestals. All right, left off getting the pinion angle set, and it's just tacked in, so that way in the future when we go get the drive shaft made, we can be 100% sure, and God forbid if that thing isn't right, all we got is a couple tack welds we can split and move it just a little bit and re-tack it. But I think it'll be fine where it's at. It's right at 2 degrees, maybe 2.1, and this thing is going to be more, it's going to be driven hard. So that pinion angle is going to want to rise because we're going to be, this thing isn't made to really cruise. So that 2 degrees should be perfect. Jason said whenever he's built chassis in the past and put rear ends and everything in, he's always tried to keep everything at 2 degrees, and it's been great. That's what he's always done. And I know a lot of people will have their own opinions and argue. I think, you know, like anything, there's 1,000 right ways to do it. But I think it'll be okay for now, and we'll know more when we mock a drive shaft up and kind of, you know, see the angle and everything. So, which I will bring the drive shaft in, and we'll check that stuff. Anyway, moving on. So we got some gauges, some cool Stuart Warner gauges. And it came in this old gauge pod, aluminum gauge pod. This is pretty cool. Dad bought this on Facebook Marketplace, and it actually came out of a 55 Chevy that was an original race car, which, if you guys are interested, I will throw some pictures in right here. Okay, hope you guys like seeing that. Pretty cool car. It's painted back in the 60s, I do believe, so it's pretty much been a race car most of its life. Anyway, we are going to mount this thing underneath the dash, and I will show you where. Right underneath the glove box, which the glove box is open, but this will mount right up underneath the glove box, and it's slightly angled, so it will come up and faces the driver like perfectly. So we'll go ahead and get this thing in place where I want it, well, Dad and I looked at it yesterday and kind of figured out where we wanted it. So I'll get it in position, mark my holes, drill it, and we're going to use some nut certs like we did on the floor so we can thread this thing in and lock it in, and it's going to be in there for good. So, and that way I want to get this done so Jason can get wiring finished. So, and sorry for all the talking, but I'll go ahead and update you guys where we're at too on some other wiring stuff. So Jason fixed these. We JB welded some 1157 bulb ends in, and he's got those all done. So those are all ready. Put new reverse light deals in because those were all rusted out, and actually they were rusted out, the other two were missing. So those are good to go now. And then we will be putting the front end on this car probably today or tomorrow, so he can run wires for the headlights, and as well as marking holes, or a hole to make for the intake. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at. But as for right now, let's get this gauge pod cluster deal mounted under the dash, and then we will move on from there. there it is, guys. So I slightly angled it towards the driver, and if you look, you know, you can be shifting, not have it block anything, so that's good. It's just, it looks really good. Very happy with that. Very, very happy with it. Like, you can still see it from the passenger side, which is good, but it's just got a slight angle where it faces the driver. So yeah, there's that. So now we got that done. So I think everything's pretty much squared away, minus getting the front end back on it so Jason can wire up the headlights, but everything else should be ready to wire up now, except for turn signal switch. We got that coming, but we got an ignition switch, headlight switch. Headlights are ready, just need to have the front end put on. Tail lights are ready, as I showed you. And now this gauge cluster is ready so we can run wires for the gauges we want to run. Anyway, so now we're caught up, and that should be just about it for now. I'll hopefully get some footage of us getting this front end put back on it, measure for a hole to cut out in my little centerpiece, and should be ready to mount the scoop. And I might include going over the drive shaft. I'm not 100%, but basically with the front end and then cutting the hole in it and mounting the scoop, we'll probably end it for this video. And I'll hopefully finish that stuff up tomorrow, because I got to jump on another job, get it done as well, which isn't too big of a deal. But anyway, hopefully next clip you guys see, we're throwing this front end on. Also forgot to mention how cool it is sitting in the driver's seat and seeing the air cleaners and carbs stick up past the windshield. Pretty neat. That's what I want to run the scoop, and the scoop's going to be awesome, but man, it's almost nothing cooler than seeing that. All right, so I ended up drilling the spot welds out, as you can see there. So I've got this thing where it is now flippable and whatnot, so I can position it where I want and get it welded back in wherever I desire, so I can modify it. And then I borrowed a factory radiator. That way I can at least just use this for mock-up. So since this isn't obviously an original 55 Chevy, normally they have like a little core support kit that goes under here, like little rubber and like a couple shims and everything, because that also dictates how it mounts up to your fenders and everything. But obviously this is a tilt front end. We don't need any of that. So we're basically just gonna put a little rubber gasket in here, and I'm gonna clamp it back in place. That way I can use this stock right here, make my supports. And what I'm going to do is weld them onto those, and then come down to a little plate that bolts in with some nutserts. That way this whole core support is removable. So right now what I'm going to do is slip that gasket in there, clamp it back in place, square everything up, be sure I got this thing even, you know, so it's not sitting crooked. So we'll do a little bit of measuring, and then that way I can measure and cut my bars and get them exactly how I want them. And the end of this core support's a little twisted, as you can tell. The other side is not, this one is. So that'll allow me to kind of twist it back in place as I go and get this thing squared up. So probably set you guys up on a time lapse while I get all this crap done, and then we'll show you what my conclusion is and what I'm thinking when I'm ready to start, you know, tacking, bolting, and all that fancy stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to it so we can get this knocked out. All right, there's first initial mock-up. So putting that baffle piece down here ought to work out perfect. Radiator's sitting pretty dang straight. And then we can buy a shroud specifically for a 6-cylinder style. And then we got room for our fan and shroud. And it shouldn't be too big of a deal to get hoses. So it looks like it ought to be fairly simple. So basically just walk in the parts store and look for some elbows and bends that I need, and should be able to make it happen no problem. So what I'm going to move on to now is measuring and laying out for the outer support beams. So I'll check back in and show you guys a little bit of how I decide to do those and why. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started on that, and we'll go from there. All right, so we got these tacked in place, and for some reason this thing fought me over here getting that post tacked in on the actual core support itself. But anyway, turned out all right though. Just kind of fought me, had to tweak this thing a little bit, but ended up welding pretty good. And then got these plates tacked in down here. So now what I'm going to do while this thing is mocked up like this, I'll probably try to clamp this to the frame, and I'm going to drill mount hole there, mount hole there, mount hole there, and a mount hole back there. And then bolt that thing in. That way it's right where I want it. Then I can finish weld around the bottom of the post. And also at the top here, we're going to cut this off, box off the end. Same with both sides. That way it's clean looking and doesn't look like just some hacked together mess. That way it'll look semi-professional. Then when we know it bolts in and everything works right, excuse me, everything works right, we can pop this back off, and I'll let Dad clean up the core support, and we'll get the thing all painted up real nice. So that way it looks good and ties in with everything else. So let's go ahead and get these things clamped and drilled, and then we'll check back in and show you how it turns out. Okay, went ahead and finished up these mounts. So we'll show you where I'm at here. Got them drilled and bolted in. Still messy from all the cutting oil, but they turned out pretty nice. So nice and solid now. So what we're ready for is burning those welds in around the base of each one. So we'll burn all those in, and we definitely need to clean up that area from all the cutting oil from drilling through that thick plate, which that's not that big a deal. Other than that, this one come out about perfect, and this one over here slid on me and moved just a little bit. The actual post did, so you can see it's kind of, the bottom's angling towards the front a little bit, but I can probably loosen the bolts up, shimmy it back just a hair. But overall, looks pretty darn good. So now we are ready to weld those in, like I just stated, and then we'll come right here, cut these off at the ends, box them in, and we'll be good to go. And that ought to round this little video out of making this core support and everything else we've done. So go ahead and get these ends cut off and weld these in after lunch, and then show you guys where we're at. Okay, went ahead and finished everything up, so I'll show you guys where I'm at. So we got her all welded in. She's bolted in. Got our end caps made. Those turned out really good. And then here's this side as well. See if we can get it to focus in. Pretty happy with it. All done, nice and stable. So now we are ready to remove this thing. I can take the radiator back to my buddy since he let us borrow it, and then we're ready to clean this core support up and get it prepped and ready for paint. and then obviously be able to do everything else up front here. So anyway, yeah, I think that wraps it up for this video here. So hope you guys enjoyed it, and hope you're ready for the next one. We'll be able to make some more forward progress on this thing, which ought to be exciting, like getting the headers on it, hopefully getting the clutch linkage set up, as well as getting the engine painted. It's all stuff coming in the future. So, but yeah, that's it for now. So see you guys in the next video. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and we're out.